It's Part of Truth with Bela Act, J.J. Tabani. Tonight, we pay tribute to Pravin Gordhan, former Minister of Public Enterprises. I want to talk a little bit about, the role that Pravin Gordhan played. You know, in South Africa, I think we battle with reflections when somebody has passed away. I've heard people truly, taking out the snake. Over the legacy of Pravin Gordhan. And there are two extremes. There are people who want us to believe that Pravin was a total angel who could do no wrong. And there are those who want us to believe he was a total devil who couldn't do any right. And both of them are lies. Because any legacy of somebody who has lived this life to the fullest will be a mixed one. I want to talk about Pravin as an activist. And some of you may be too young to understand what it means to be a founder of the UDF. When you're a founder of UDF, you have actually already sacrificed your life because you could be jailed, you could be tortured, you could be killed. And Pravin Gordhan, with somebody with a career in pharmacy, who actually owned a pharmacy in KZN, dropped all of that and put all his energy in making sure that this country is liberated. In those days, it was also a precarious thing to organize a particular racial group. So the Indian Congress is part of what he dedicated his life to make sure that that community can fall in line, if you like, in terms of the general struggle of liberating this country. And I think for that, we need to commend him. He sacrificed his family life, he sacrificed his own career to make sure that you and I tonight are free to express ourselves about what's happening in this country, free to express ourselves, to live the life that we want, free to enjoy the dividends of the freedom for which he sacrificed. And I think that those who want us to sort of forget that and only remember his 2 or 3 last years when they didn't particularly like him are not honest. Similarly, dishonest are those who don't want us to reflect at Pravin the politician. There's something that happens to people who are even heroes when they get into politics. And I think that the politicians themselves have even figured out how to understand that phenomenon. That's why somebody like President Mbeki, who I've got a lot of respect for, when Mugabe passed away, he worshipped the guy. He said, this guy is a revolutionary, and that's all. But he's not saying he's a revolutionary who eventually disappointed his own people. Before he could die, refused to get out of power, was in power for 40 years. That can be a good thing, even if you were a liberator of the people. So Pravin the politician, in the first part of his life as a politician, was a corruption buster and stood against the decline that was introduced during the Zuma years. And for that, we've got to have a big tick and say, there's the kind of model civil servants. He's a guy who ensured that SARS, as a bureaucrat, right, SARS became something that was a modern institution that has, up to now, proved that it can actually deliver the goods in terms of ensuring the revenue that can build schools, build hospitals, build roads. And I think that, in fact, you would struggle to remember who was the SARS commissioner before Pravin. That's how excellent he was in that regard. His last assignment as public enterprise minister was a disaster. And I want people not to mince their words about it. It was a total disaster. Because under him, ESCOM was failing, Transnet was failing, you name it, SAA was failing, almost sold, to the lowest bidder. and those things, I'm quite sure he himself was not proud about what he did. Right? And I think we need to say those things. Because if we don't say those things, we're not going to learn from it. We're going to now fool ourselves into believing that all was honky-dory. It wasn't, And I think that people who want us not to reflect on those things are having the wrong end of the stick. If you look at somebody's life, especially a life well led, you've got to be able to say, yes, but there were some regrets as Sinatra would say, maybe too few to mention. And therefore, those regrets cannot wipe out his massive, massive legacy as a stalwart of our movement. And I think that with that picture that shows somebody who was human, who was only human, who could make mistakes and so on. His own comrades, who today are, berating those who call him arrogant, called him so. They even said, no, this guy sometimes doesn't come to meetings or comes to meetings and just walks out and whatever, and then we ending up with egg on our face. In fact, the secretary of the ANC almost called him out in public and had to apologize very fast, because we know that Pravin indeed was somebody who was larger than life. And his footprints will be remembered by generations to come. You hate him, you like him. He has made his mark. And so all the people who are berating him and insulting him now, some of them, could not even wipe their noses when he was in the trenches. And I think that some of it is in bad taste. But it's important that when we analyze somebody's legacy, we look at the good, we take the good with the bad, in order to learn from that life that indeed was well led. I thought I would talk a little bit about what happened over the weekend with President Mbeki. President Mbeki is probably one of my favorite politicians, because he just has a way of talking in such a way that you realize this person is probably 10 years ahead of you in terms of intellect, and that doesn't mean he doesn't have weaknesses. I mean, Mbeki told us just 6 months ago that ANC was led by crooks and he's not going to campaign for them. And then he changed his mind and went to campaign. And then this weekend he tried to explain what all that was about. But I'm not going to go into that. But to go into his characterization, right, and sad characterization of some in the ANC who, in fact, are formally known as crooks. He says there's a region, and he didn't name it by, he didn't call it by name, where every single branch is led by a criminal, he says. It's not me. It's a stalwart of the ANC telling us. Same in KZN, where people in a particular branch decided not to vote, because if they voted and the ANC won, that would mean that they are promoting a crook. So I found that very, very fascinating. But it does say a lot about the introspection that's necessary for the ANC. And I'm glad that the ANC is doing that in terms of their own regional conferences and their own program of action to try and get to the bottom of why there's a gap between them as governors and those they govern. And I think that there's a lot of work there to be done. And what Mbeki has underlined, right, is that it's important that comrades tell each other the truth. What we saw before the elections, when there was a frenzy, and all of these people rushing to the township to say people must vote blindly. What Matthew Paul said is wrong. It's wrong because now, because there's no election, the truth is coming out. That, hey, comrades, we are dealing with a criminal syndicate here. We must actually review all our membership. New members, all members must come and reapply to be members so that we can weed out the crooks. I think that's the most sobering of assessments that I've ever had. And, kudos to somebody like Thabo Mbeki. And the ANC must be blessed to still have somebody like that in their midst. And of course, the Bela bill has been on my mind. I wonder if enough time to talk about it, except to say DA must go away. That's one I can tell you now. 1976, students went out into the street and died so that we don't have this argument, where people think that their language, out of 12 languages, is superior and must be tiptoed around. Because that's really what, at the end of the day, there could be many frills and so on. At the heart of this whole thing is racism. Of people are refusing to change. They want to now hunker to the past, where Africans, people were tiptoeing around it, and that's nonsense, right? All languages must be invested in so that at some point they can be equal. And our kids must be able to go into schools and learn in the language of their choice and not be told, no, you are too illiterate just because you don't know English. Bela Bill is beginning to take what the students of 76 fought for and translate it into what the new South Africa must be about, what the new education system must be about. It can't be an enclave somewhere where you go in and you are told, no, if you can't prat, where a guy. It's hugely out of proportion with the demographics of this country. In this country, all languages, be it English, Afrikaans, Zulu, Setswana, must have a same equal place. And if the DA doesn't want that, they're in a wrong place, they're in a wrong time zone, they must go away. And I hope that this thing about suspending the clauses and so on must just be a political, a temporary solution to just get them to think straight. But in any event, the president has signed the act. This whole issue of suspending thing must be just a maneuver. We got to be able to be serious about change in this country so that every single South African can reap the dividends of the freedom that we acquired here 30 years ago on the sacrifices of people such as Pravin Gordhan, who are bidding farewell this week. We're talking to the mayor of Kuruleni, Dr. Klagaza, after the break. Stay tuned.